War is hell. It reaches every hand, from the soldier in the trench to the nurse at his side, from the engineer forging weapons to the families left behind. These are their stories. This is World War I Stories, Tales Beyond the Trenches.
Today's episode, The Orphan House. The thunder cracked outside as she looked up at the leaky ceiling. The rain had begun dripping into the pot hours ago, and now it was almost full. She would have to get another one or empty this one fast enough to keep the floor from becoming dangerous for the 6 children in her care. She scurried down the stairs and into the kitchen and retrieved a stock pot, one normally used for porridge in the mornings. It would have to be washed as soon as the storm let up. She knew this. She stood at the bottom of the steps and looked upwards towards her destination. She began to ascend and slipped on the first step. More water. Was there another leak? She looked up. There was. Thankfully, it was a slow leak, but still, she would have to empty the pot upstairs and use it here. She regained her footing and continued upward. Abbess Theodora Petkova had been part of St. Ivan of Brila Orphan House for 10 years. She had come as a teenager and had worked hard, feeding, changing, teaching, and playing with the children in her care. The old abbess, Mother Evdokia, had died the previous spring, and Theodora, being the longest tenured woman in the house at that time, had been named abbess in her stead. At 27, she was the youngest abbess anyone in Shishkovsky could remember. She moved quietly. The house was finally still. Magdalena, the matron of the house, had long since retreated to her bedroom upstairs. Elena and Rada, the care sisters, slept in a smaller room at the back, though sleep had become a generous word for what any of them managed. The 6 children were squeezed into a third room on the upper floor, 2 to a bed. One pallet laid crosswise where the space allowed. Even before the rain, the rooms felt smaller than they once had. With the pot switched, she proceeded to her normal late-night tasks. She made certain the kitchen was clean, that the toys were gathered and stacked, and then the ingredients for the next morning's porridge were staged and ready for Elena and Rada. The care sisters did the bulk of the food preparation and cooking for the home. She liked to make their work easier where she could. The quiet of the house was deafening in itself. Then she heard it, a sound from the road. Footsteps, many of them. The noise grew louder as she made her way towards the parlor. Voices carried through the rain, the steady rhythm of boots, and beneath them the dull strike of hoofs. She opened the front door and stepped onto the stoop of the modest home. The house had not been built for children. It had been erected in 1883 by Kirill Vilanov, a merchant who had returned from Vienna with ideas of symmetry and steep roofs. He had favored tall windows and decorative trim, uncommon in Shishkovsky. When he built a grander residence nearer to Sofia, he donated the old house to the church. It had been called generous at the time. The road itself was a mere 15 feet from the house. She stood underneath an awning that was in need of repair. It did not leak like the roof of the house itself, but it did droop substantially. She often feared that it would fall and hurt one of the children, but thankfully that had not happened. Not yet. The noise itself was not unfamiliar. She had heard it many times before since the war started. But to hear it at this time of night and during a thunderstorm was a surreal surprise. Before her and along the road was a column of men and horses as far as she could see, which, in the darkness and through the pelting rain, was not very far. Some carried lanterns, and the light glinted softly off the bayonets that protruded off the ends of some of the rifles the men had slung against their backs. She heard something else now, this coming from upstairs. Did somebody open a window? She stepped off of the porch and into the rain. She looked back and up at the second story of the house. 3 children were peering out of the window. They quickly ducked back and giggled. As the procession of men had turned into a procession of supply wagons, She smiled, shaking her head as she went back inside. She awoke to the morning sun shining through her window and to running footsteps just outside her door on the first floor of the orphan house. Her room had been a study or maybe a library for the former occupant of the home. It was situated at the front of the house. Her bedroom lay only a few steps from the front door. As a light sleeper, she was able to hear if the front door opened. Older orphans had a tendency to sneak out. She slowly rose from the bed and crossed the room to stare into the cracked looking glass that adorned her wall. Her dark brown hair was tousled from sleep, and her brown eyes showed signs of weariness. But overall, she thought she was pretty. She wondered if someday she would have a husband. A crash just outside her door broke her trance. She turned, crossed the room, and threw open the door. Just outside was Elitza, a 6-year-old girl who had lost both her parents and a baby brother in a house fire just 3 years ago. 3 years old at the time, Elitza somehow managed to escape, and she had been at St. Ivan of Rila ever since. Now she sat in the center of broken glass. It had been a decorative vase with vibrant greens and yellows. Now it was just shards of glass all over the floor. She rushed to Elitza and picked her out of the debris field, deftly taking her into her arms. She felt something in her foot, but would worry about that later. At that moment, Elena and Rada ran in from the kitchen, and Magdalena appeared at the top of the stairs. "Is everything all right?" asked Mags. That is what the women of the house preferred to call Magdalena. Theodore had sat the little girl on an ottoman nearby and was examining her as she spoke. "It's okay. It looks like Elitza here dropped a vase. I don't see any cuts, though." "I'll grab a broom," said Rada, and she disappeared back into the kitchen, only to return a moment later with the broom. As the abbess, everything in this house was under her direction. "How did this happen? Where are the other children?" It was Mags who answered first. "I have Stefan and Maria upstairs. They're working on their studies." Stefan and Maria were the two oldest children in the house. Stefan at 10 years old and Maria at 9. Stefan had lost his mother when he was 5, and his father had been called away to fight. He had no other family, so he had been placed here. Maria had been here since she was found on the roadside by travelers when she was just 4 years old. Nobody knew anything about her parents. Elena then informed her that the other 3 children were in the kitchen eating breakfast. With everyone accounted for, Theodora picked up little Elitza and began to carry her into the kitchen. "Abbess, you're bleeding!" exclaimed Elena. Theodora had felt a slight pain in her left foot as she walked, but now she could see that she had stepped on a piece of the vase, and that piece had pierced the heel of her foot. Mags rushed down the stairs. "Elena, take Elitza into the kitchen. Abbess, let me clean your foot." Theodora glanced at both ladies before handing Elitza over. "Very well, thank you." They retreated back to Theodora's bedroom, where she sat on the bed as Mags tended to her foot. "These children," Mags stated. "You have to love them even if they are a lot." Magdalena was an older woman, and was the matron or senior sister of the house. She had come to the house 3 years ago, transferring from a nunnery in Sofia. She had given her life to Christ in her mid-20s, and after years of solitude in the nunnery, longed for something different. The orphan house was perfect for her. "That was a nice vase, too," Theodore added. Mags chuckled. "Yes, it was. But that little Elitza is a slippery one. She escapes faster than any other child I have ever met." Theodora laughed. "You weren't here when Maria was that age. Keeping her in the house was quite the chore." Mag's face tightened, and her tone changed. "Abbess, I heard a rumor." "What rumor is that?" Theodora asked. But before Mags could answer, there was a loud knock at the front door that startled them both. "Already?" Mags asked. Theodore shot her a confused look and walked gingerly to the door, favoring her left foot. At the door stood a man wearing a dark wool suit and matching bowler hat. His cream shirt underneath contrasted with the dark color of the suit. It was Mags who had opened the door, and, looking directly at her, he stated, "I assume you're the abbess of the house, ma'am?" Mag's posture straightened. I am not? She pointed at Theodora. Miss Petkova is the abbess at St. Ivan. My apologies, the man started. I am Kirill Bozolov. I am the regional welfare director. He paused a moment, trying to let the title seem more important than it really was. From Kirstendil, he added. Theodora stepped forward, edging just past Mags. I am the abbess of this house. She put her hand out to shake his. He took it briefly. May I come in? He asked. Most certainly, she responded, and led him into the parlor, where he took a seat in a chair just under the front window. She addressed Mags. Please, get the gentleman some tea. Mag still stood by the doorway, her posture straight, her look serious. It's almost as if she knew something. Finally, she nodded towards the abbess and disappeared into the kitchen. Theodora took a seat on an adjacent chair facing Bozolov. What can I do for you, Mr. Bozolov? She asked. He adjusted himself in the chair and pulled out his collar. Well, as you well know, your village is situated within the authority of Christendale district, even though you're not within the city itself. She nodded, affirming that she knew this. He continued, with the war and all, we're seeing an influx of children. Children of unfortunate circumstances. You mean orphaned, she corrected. It was his turn to nod. Yes, and within the city we have regulations. We can only put so many children into the homes we have. She shook her head. This revelation was truly sad for her. That is quite unfortunate. It is. However, here in Chitovsky, you have no such regulations. He opened his arms in a symbolic gesture as he spoke. She wondered what he was getting at and when he would get to the point. Mags returned with the tea, and the man took it in both hands. He blew on it symbolically and took a sip. He sat the teacup on the saucer and placed it in his lap. We're going to send children to you. Theodora laughed out loud, thinking the man had been joking. When she looked at him again, his face was stone. He was serious. She felt Mag's hand on her shoulder. She straightened. You're serious? She asked. Quite. He stood, setting the tea on a side table. He looked out the large picture window. She looked at Mags and then back at him. He had his back to her now. We do not have room for more children. We are already sleeping two per pallet in their room. Even my care sisters share a room. He turned to her. His look was of one who lacked empathy. She had not seen that in his face before. I'm fully aware of how this house is currently staffed and of its size. You and the other ladies will just have to share your rooms as well, and this parlor is rather spacious. We will provide blankets and pillows, though, so you won't be without those needs. She stood, angry at his flippant attitude. And what about food? And do me a favor, look around this place. Do you see the holes in the walls? The missing floorboards? Did you know that when it rains the roof leaks? What would you do about that? This house is barely livable for the 10 of us already here, and you wish to add more? She watched as he walked towards the front door to leave. Apparently, he had said all there was he needed to say. As he opened the door to leave, he turned to her. They will be here tomorrow morning. Be ready. He walked out and closed the door behind him. Theodora sat back down. She was in a daze. What had just happened? Max stood beside her. That's the rumor I heard. She paced around the parlor waiting. They had spent the evening before preparing the best they could for the new arrivals. Elena and Rada had made extra porridge this morning. They wanted to be prepared just in case the children were hungry when they arrived. She stopped when she heard the noise. Glancing out the front window, she watched as another procession of soldiers, horses, and wagons began to pass by. As usual, the children had also gathered because watching the soldiers was their favorite thing to do. Soon, the four boys would be pretending at war, and the girls would be pretending to be nurses. It was the same routine every time the soldiers marched by. Two wagons lagged just behind the line of soldiers. Instead of continuing, they stopped. She stepped outside as a man jumped down from the seat of one wagon and started to help the children to the ground. Nobody said a word. There were 4 men in all. They walked past her with blankets, bags, and other items. She watched them march into the house, lay the items in the parlor, and return to the wagon. 5 minutes later, the wagons were gone, and 15 quiet, dirty, and scared children stood before her. One of them, a little girl, was crying. She approached the crying girl and reached out her hand. To her surprise, the girl took it. "Come inside, children. We have porridge." She started towards the door of the house where the other sisters waited to greet them. The administration office was cold and dimly lit. She sat just outside the office of Boris Stanev, the district inspector. It had been 2 weeks since the children population of the house had gone from 6 to 21, and in that time the conditions had worsened. The extra traffic in the home caused even more floorboards to crack and break. Leaks had worsened, and food was scarce. She had set out on foot early this morning to visit with the inspector. She knew there was no way he could allow children to live in a home such as that. He would certainly send men out to make the necessary repairs. He could also not allow children to go hungry, so she would ask for regular food deliveries. The door was opened, and she was beckoned in. Stanev was a short and stout man. She could tell this even though he did not stand to greet her. He sat behind an oak desk with an indifferent look on his face. "Please, have a seat." He picked up a piece of paper and read from it. "It's Abbess Petkova, correct?" "Yes, sir, from St. Ivan of Rila Orphan House." He set the paper down and clasped his hands together on the desk. "What can I do for you?" She knew her nerves were showing, but she could not control them. She began. "Well, sir, I have 21 children in my care. I also have 3 other sisters living in the house. It's quite crowded." "Yes," he responded. "Many orphan houses are having this same issue. It's unfortunate." She continued on. "Right. Yes, well, the house is in quite a state of disrepair. I feel it's unsuitable for the children in its current state." His hands rose to his chin. "Well, that is a problem. What kind of issues do you have?" She was elated. He was listening. "Well, sir, for starters, the roof leaks. When it rains, I have to use stock pots and other items to catch the water. Also, some of the floorboards are broken. A child could easily break an ankle, not to mention the broken window that lets in the nightly cold air. The overcrowding, and even worse, is the lack of food. Have you tried getting those around you to donate the labor to fix things, or even food?" This was a question she had not expected. "Yes, sir. Many neighbors have donated items to the house to help feed the children, but we all figured that the disrepair should be handled by the state." He stood now. He was indeed a short man. "In normal circumstances, you are correct. We would come in and make the repairs. We do want children to be safe and comfortable, especially those in dire circumstances. But these are not normal circumstances. We are at war." "So what is to happen, sir?" she asked. "Well, sadly, nothing. I simply do not have the labor or the materials to spare to fix every orphan house in Bulgaria. The war effort requires a great sacrifice." She was floored. Nothing was going to get done. "Are you saying that there is nothing you can do? I'm telling you that the house is unsuitable for 10 of us. Now there's 21 children. It is in desperate need of repair, not to mention food," she pleaded. "Ma'am, nobody told you to take in 21 children." "On the contrary, sir. A man named Bozolov came to tell me I was getting more children due to the lack of regulation in the village." This revelation made him stand up straighter than he had been. "Bozolov, you don't say?" "Yes, sir. One morning he said it was going to happen, and the next, all 15 extra children were dropped off. I did not ask for this." His look turned contemplative. Hope arose in her chest. Then, just as quickly, he became dismissive. "Well, my hands are tied. I'm sorry." That was the final nail in the coffin. She took that as a dismissal. She sat at the dining table, a lantern burning and a cup of hot tea before her. The rest of the house was dark. She replayed the events of that morning in her head. How Stanif could so flippantly refuse her the needs of the house, she could not comprehend. She felt a wave of depression rise deep within her the more she thought about it. She heard rustling in the parlor. Someone was coming. She looked towards the entry to see Mags and Rada approach. The two women sat around the small table with her. They sat in silence. A minute later, Elena entered. She sighed in comfort. Her sisters were here for her. "Should I make some tea?" Elena asked. Theodora looked down at her cup. She could tell the tea inside was cold. "I have some already, but I'm sure you all would like some. By all means." She did not know why she didn't just say yes. Elena crossed the room and lit the stove with a match. From her vantage point, Theodora could see the wisp of smoke from the match dance in the air when Elena blew it out. When tea was served, the three sisters sat together at the table. She did not know how it happened, but all four of them were now holding hands. Mags broke the silence. "Abbess, I know that things did not work out the way you wanted today." Theodora scoffed. "That's putting it lightly." There was an uncomfortable silence until Rada spoke. "I was able to pick up some extra flour earlier today from the Reverend. I can make biscuits in the morning." She looked lovingly at Rada. "That would be very nice, dear. Thank you." "You didn't let anybody down," Max blurted out. Tears started to well in Theodora's eyes. "But I feel like I did." Elena stood and walked around the table. She stopped behind her Abbess, reached down, and put her arms around her. Theodora began to cry. Soon, Max and Rada joined the hug. The three women stood there surrounding a sitting Theodora, holding her, comforting her as she cried. Theodora was unaware of how long they held her before Max broke away. "We better get to bed." "You're right," Theodora added as she wiped at her eyes with a nearby napkin. "Be careful walking through the parlor. There are sleeping children everywhere," Elena muttered. "Sleeping there, on the upstairs landing, in our rooms. There are children everywhere," Rada added. Theodora stood in the entryway to the parlor. She could see at least 6 sleeping children spaced out on the floor. She wiped her eyes again and then looked at her sisters. "This house is not perfect. It's falling apart. We have to scrounge for food. There's only 4 of us to care for them all. But somehow, you 3 make it work." And as she crossed the parlor to her room, a child coughed in her sleep. The commotion outside woke her from a dead sleep. She opened her eyes to the sunlight spilling through her window. She rose quickly and went to the door. The parlor was crowded with children now, none of them sleeping. They were all clamoring for position at the window and looking outside. She addressed them. "Come on, children. No need to get excited. We see soldiers walk by every day." One of the older children, named Georgie, looked at her. "It's not soldiers, Abbess." "It's not?" she asked. "Well then, what can be making all of that ruckus?" "Come look," Georgie responded. As she approached, the children moved to make room. Her hands flew to her mouth at the sight of 4 wagons and many men just outside. They were unloading wood, nails, hammers, and other essentials. She did not hear Mag's approach. "Rada and Elena went to every house in the village yesterday as you napped." She turned to look at the older woman. "They did this?" Mags nodded her head in the affirmative. "Where are they now?" Theodora asked. Mags pointed out the window. "Right there." She looked back out to see the 2 sisters helping unload the wagons. "But I smell biscuits. How did—" Mags interrupted her. "They woke early, made the biscuits, and now they're working. Would you like some tea?" She did want tea, but now was not the time. Still in her bedclothes, she walked briskly through the door and outside. She did not ask for guidance. She merely joined everyone in the unloading of the wagons. Before she knew it, the children were also spilling out of the home. The ones old enough to help were eager to do so. The younger ones were guided back into the house to do chores. She recognized shopkeeper Todor Belikov and approached him. I cannot believe this. This is certainly a miracle. His smile was large and radiant. She liked that. Abbess, a miracle would have been the government doing its job and not letting children or even you sisters live like this. How did you men get all the supplies? She asked. He scratched his head. You know, I'm not sure. I was just asked to volunteer. I can do flooring. It was her turn to smile now. How wonderful! She heard another man barking orders. She headed in that direction. Sir, where did all this material come from? The man put his hand on his hips. From everyone. I had nails and some wood. Other carpenters had wood too. We all have hammers, the sisters asked, and now we're here. She was beside herself with happiness at this turn of events. Within an hour, the wagons had been unloaded and the material sorted in front of the house. She stood before it all, still in awe of what was happening. The villagers had spent the morning loading the wagons in the little town and unloading it here. They were all taking a break before the real work could begin. Elena and Rada had retreated back into the house to make tea for everyone. There was not enough cups, so people were sharing. She looked to see children looking through the windows of the house. They were pointing excitedly as they watched the scene outside. She looked down again to see the material laying there, like a miracle performed, a prayer answered. She almost did not hear the order. It came like a wave. A man's voice, yelling loud, drowning out all other noise. Halt the line! Confused, she turned to see the road crammed with soldiers. The children weren't looking at the material after all. They were looking at the road and the soldiers that had been approaching. Soldiers marching along this road since the war started had been commonplace. But why had they stopped? She found herself moving towards the man that gave the order. She did not even have a chance to greet him. What is this? He asked her as he pointed to the wagons and the material. We're going to repair the orphan house, sir. I'm the Abbess here. Interesting. This is an orphanage? He asked. It is, sir. May I ask why you stopped? No, you may not. His curt reply was unexpected. It made her uneasy. Then he yelled again. Company, commandeer this material and these wagons for the war effort.
You've been listening to World War I Stories, Tales Beyond the Trenches, where history comes alive through the lives of those who lived it. If this episode moved you, please share it, follow, and leave a rating. Help keep these stories alive. Want to hold these stories in your hand? Explore the books inspired by them, available now on Kindle and in paperback.